let the sheNEDigans begin. Long live the sheNEDigans.
Hello and welcome to the topic of this video. As always, let's talk some sheNEDigans. So today's video is actually going to be based off of, top 10 guilty pleasure movies. We all have them. We all know that we have just those movies that, although we know are really, really bad, we just love them. Whether or not it's because they have just like one thing that you love about it, or just like, or because you like to make fun of it or whatnot. We all have a guilty pleasure movie, and actually I would argue we have more than one guilty pleasure movie. So I figured, how about we talk about my top 10 guilty pleasure movies. Jason X. Okay, so yeah, I have a Friday the 13th film on here. Now, here's the thing. You know me. I love Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th is arguably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, horror movie franchise of all time. And I know it's not the best, but there's a lot of just interesting things I love about the franchise overall. Now, I would argue that with Jason X, this is when Jason goes into outer space. And this is literally where the movie was like, yeah, we have no idea where to go with this franchise. So, screw it. Send Jason into outer space, because that's the most logical step for you to go to. So, in that regard, I find the movie very interesting. I don't think it's don't get me wrong, it's a bad movie, but I find it enjoyable to a degree. I look at it as a crappy Friday the 13th movie, a decent, okay slasher movie, and a really bad, cheesy sci-fi movie. That's basically the way I look at it. It's fun, it's goofy, and hey, it does have some incredible, memorable kills from Jason, so hey, you can't go wrong with that. Man-Thing. Okay, so this is actually a little bit of an obscure Marvel movie. Yes, there's a Marvel movie called Man-Thing, and it came out quite a few years ago. It was made by Lionsgate, and it didn't really go to any theaters. I think it maybe only went to a few. And then eventually it was released on the Sci-Fi Channel, if that says anything about the quality of this movie. Man-Thing is based off of the superhero, or more like anti-hero, Man-Thing from Marvel Comics. And he's always been looked at as like a weird, swamp-like creature, and he's always been like a little bit creepy, but and he does have like some scary moments in his comics, but overall, this movie, they tried to make it into a pure downright horror film, which I found very interesting. Not to mention, they completely changed the story from the comics into this movie. It's very weird because, I mean, the comic was at least in some way attached to like the super soldier serum and stuff like that, whereas with this movie it's purely Indian spirits, and it's all about, protecting nature, or nature's going to kill you. Like I said, very weird movie. I enjoy it to a degree because it's one of the only, actually, I think it's the only Marvel horror movie. I mean, I know some people talk about Blade, but I don't really consider those horror movies. I consider those like action, fantasy horror kind of flicks, something like that. But I don't really consider them pure downright horror. They're not really scary. Whereas with Swamp Thing, it attempts to be a scary movie. It's really not scary at all, but there's a lot of blood, gore. I'm pretty sure there's actually one sex scene at the opening of the movie. So yeah, it's got all your stereotypical things for your average monster slasher movie. It's really quite interesting to watch, and I think it's really bad, cheesy horror fun, and that's really why I like it. On top of that, just being a very interesting product that, there's a Marvel horror movie. Dragon Wars. Now, I don't know if anybody at all remembers the trailers for this movie coming out. It was a really interesting thing. Now, I love anything to do with dragons, so when I saw this trailer, I thought, wow, this movie looks amazing. Like it could be just really bad, but at least like a good, popcorn, cheesy, dragon fighting movie. I thought that in that regard, I thought it'd be really cool and fun to watch. I'm really happy I didn't go to theaters to see this movie. It wound up on Sci-Fi Channel a few years later or something like that, and then I wound up watching it. And the dragon fights are still, in some regard, kind of cool, but it's a really, really, really bad movie. There's some enjoyable moments, as I said, with like some of like the dragon fights and even just like some of the action set pieces and whatnot. But the acting is terrible. The story is, in many regards, actually a little bit nonsensical. There's a lot of elements about it that just don't make any sense, and there's definitely like a lot of plot holes that within this movie. So like overall, it's fun to watch purely for the dragon stuff, and even then it's actually a little bit lackluster. But I just remember those fond memories of like seeing this trailer and then finally watching the movie, and I'm like, wow, that was kind of fun. And then I watched it a few years later, and I'm like, wow, that's a really bad movie, but hey, I still kind of like it. It's fun. Mortal Kombat. Okay, I think a lot of people actually like this movie and would probably put it within a guilty pleasure list if they, wanted to. This is actually not bad. It's a bad movie, don't get me wrong, but out of a lot of the other movies on this list, I would argue there's a teensy bit more quality put into it compared to a lot of the other movies on this list. You guys obviously know the story of Mortal Kombat, and I would argue that when it comes to video game adaptations, this one's actually a lot closer when it comes to the story of Mortal Kombat than a lot of the other movies that have, video game-based movies that have ever been made. But overall, with Mortal Kombat, it's just an overall good, movie time. That's all. Gods of Egypt. Okay, so I kind of mentioned this in my, why are Egyptian movies not as big in Hollywood video, and this movie I was kind of disappointed in for a multitude of reasons. One, I love everything to do with ancient Egypt. I love the mythology, the history, the mystery behind a lot of things that have to do with ancient Egypt. And when it came down to this movie, I was a little bit excited because I was just like, wow, we're actually getting, a movie on ancient Egypt. I thought that was really, really cool. But, after watching it, I didn't go to theaters to see it. I actually just bought it on Blu-ray. And I watched it. I'm like, it's okay. It's fine. But out of a lot of the other movies that are based on mythology out there, this one was very, very lackluster. And then on top of that, you got a lot of the controversies behind the movie with the casting choices and stuff like that. It was just a bit odd, but it's really hard to not like it because, for me, like I said, I have a soft spot for anything to do with ancient Egypt. So in that regard, I found it a lot of fun to watch, especially with some of the action sequences and finally seeing some representation with Egyptian culture. Granted, not done very well, but I still had a good time watching it, and some of the really cheesy acting, you got to admire it, especially with Gerard Butler. Fantastic Four, the 2015 version. Now, this one's actually a hard one to talk about. I actually did go to theaters to see this movie, and when I first saw it, I'm like, it's okay. It's not good. It's not bad. Overall, I kind of enjoyed it, but some of the reason behind me enjoying it was not because it was a good movie. This movie's a mess. It's just... I would argue that the two previous Fantastic Four movies were actually far, far superior compared to this one, which was just trying to be a dark, gritty version of the Fantastic Four. Now, there were elements about it that I really appreciated because the director was basically trying to almost make it almost like a horror movie originally, until studio interference came in and they were like, no, we need to make this even more like a superhero movie and stuff like that. And I saw some of the ideas that the director was trying to bring forth in the movie with trying to make some horror elements similar to The Fly, according to what he said anyway, with how the kids were eventually transforming into the Fantastic Four and whatnot. But it definitely fell flat. There were a lot of issues, but it's really hard. I just, something about it, I love watching it. I love seeing just where, the things I personally think did succeed, but I also love to see where it failed, and just like how it could have been so much better if the director wasn't, who he was behind the scenes. Apparently there was a lot of horror stories about him with stuff that was going on behind the scenes. And then obviously there was the studio interference as well. So there was a lot of things I really wanted to see in this movie that supposedly was talked about a lot. And same thing with Doctor Doom. We definitely need a good bloody Doctor Doom, but honestly, even though this Doctor Doom was far from accurate with who Doctor Doom actually is, I did enjoy him to a certain degree, as he needed a lot more development, but his final stage of Doctor Doom, I kind of liked it. Like I said, I can't really explain why. It's just, like I said, it's a really bad movie, but I do enjoy it to a small degree. ScoobyDoo 2, Monsters Unleashed. Now, I really don't like the live-action Scooby-Doo movies. I love Scooby-Doo. I love everything to do with Scooby-Doo. I love the original animated show, a pup named Scooby-Doo, like the many little series and spin-offs, and some of the movies that went straight to the DVD and whatnot. Zombie Island, that's a great one. There are so many really good Scooby-Doo movies out there, and when they went into the realm of live action, I really didn't like the first one. I actually really, really hated the first one. And then when I saw the second one, trying to give it another chance and whatnot, I actually found myself enjoying it because it felt more like Scooby-Doo compared to the first one. There is still a lot of weird, off things about the movie, but at least for this movie, I was like, wow, that was at least a little bit more of an enjoyable experience compared to the first one. And in that regard, I'm still looking forward to the day when they can make a good live-action Scooby-Doo movie. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but at least in this one, I thought, okay, they kind of got back on the right track. It still needed to be far, far better, but it was good for what we got. The Crow, Wicked Prayer. So, if you guys don't know the story of The Crow is basically a gothic superhero movie to a degree. It's actually a little bit artsy compared to a lot of superhero movies, where a man and his girlfriend, fiance die, and they're actually murdered, and basically a crow brings back one of the souls back to the land of the living to make the wrong things right. Basically, go on a killing spree and go kill the people who murdered you. That's always the answer. And then after you're done with that, then you and your loved one can then cross over into heaven or something like that. It's a very interesting story and actually very touching. The first one. The sequels they're not good. They're actually garbage. But with the fourth one, which I would argue is definitely the worst out of all of them, I don't know, a part of me enjoyed it because there were some elements about the, this is actually kind of stupid, but there were some elements about my faith that were put into the movie, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I like that thing. Oh, a dark, edgy superhero who can't get killed is fighting the devil or whatever, and I'm just that's kind of cool. So edgy teen me, I thought that was really cool, but yeah, the movie is really, really not that good. The acting in this movie is absolutely atrocious at times, and I'm kind of impressed with just how bad it actually is. But there were some elements I liked about it. There were some shots and music sequences and even action sequences I really did kind of like, and even some quote-unquote philosophical things I liked about the movie. But yeah, no, it's a really, really, really bad movie. But I sort of enjoyed it. Batman and Robin. Okay, so yeah, this movie is bad. It's really, really, really bad. But I really enjoy it specifically for the fact of, well, making fun of it. And one of my favorite moments in college was being able to watch this movie with riff tracks. That was a lot of fun. And to this day, that's still one of my fondest memories with some of my college mates. And but even aside from that, I do actually like this movie a lot more than Batman Forever, where Batman Forever for me, it's just an overall bad movie and kind of forgettable. I actually far more enjoy Batman and Robin. For some of the reasons is it does actually try to emulate the essence of the Adam West Batman TV show. It's bad. It's really, really bad and doesn't translate well to, well, whatever the heck Batman and Robin was. But I really did enjoy some of the elements to it. Like, I actually like Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. If they were to actually bring back a serious Arnold Schwarzenegger to play Mr. Freeze again, I would actually be happy with that. Just give him a better script and give him better, well, literally better everything, and I think we would be all set with a pretty darn good Mr. Freeze right there. But, yeah, no, the movie is just bad, but I don't know, I just love watching this movie for some odd reason, and, I don't know, there's just some things about it I do genuinely like. Maybe it's the kid in me, because I actually did like to use, I actually did used to like this movie as a kid, but, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of fond memories I have about this movie, but it's definitely really bad. I don't know if it's as bad as number 1, though. Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. Okay, so Batman and Robin is definitely a bad movie, but I would argue Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance is a far, far worse movie. I actually really kind of like the first one. It's not great, but it's at least enjoyable to a degree. With this one, the only reason I like this movie is because of the action sequences. The action sequences are honestly really fun in this movie. I love so many of the action sequences with Ghost Rider, and this is what I actually really wanted from in the first Ghost Rider movies, just some insane action stuff. And yeah, we never got it because, well, I don't know why. I thought the action in the first movie was kind of lame, but it definitely told a much better story. I actually also like the look of Ghost Rider in this movie. I love his bike, and there's specific Ghost Rider-y things I like about this movie, but the story, the dialogue, and the editing, it's just such a weird, badly put together movie, and I don't understand just how it was made. And then there's that stupid fire pea joke, which is just the epitome of like, what are you trying to put together and film? This movie is stupid. I like the other movies, like, they're fun and can be bad, and there's like some things I like getting out of it, but with this one in particular, it's just an overall incredibly bad experience, yet I love to return to it for some odd reason. Maybe it's the action sequences, like I said. I love them. I really love Ghost Rider. Like the Ghost Rider. Kind of Nicolas Cage's performance in this movie. But other than that, I think the movie's really bad. Honestly, it's the epitome of my guilty pleasure movies. There's actually a lot of movies in my collection that I would consider guilty pleasure movies, but at least with a lot of those ones that are not on this list, I would argue there's at least some amount of quality to them compared to, well, literally anything on this list. So yeah, that's my top 10 guilty pleasure movies. So what are your guilty pleasure movies? Let me know in the comment section below. I'll be very, very interested. Mainly because, well, guilty pleasure movies are definitely a thing. A lot of people say, oh, you only have to watch, you should only watch, the most quality of movies. But For me, that's not what watching movies is. You should watch movies to really enjoy the experience and to enjoy a lot of the things that come out of them. The good and the bad. I mean, if you're watching good movies, you won't appreciate the great movies that come out. At least in my opinion. I love the whole spectrum of cinema, and I encourage you to revisit maybe some guilty pleasure movies that you guys used to like as a kid, or that you still like to this day. So if you're new to the channel, make sure that you guys subscribe and like the video, and make sure that you ring the notification bell so that way you guys can see when I'm releasing more and more videos. On top of that, also make sure you follow us on social media with Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And last but not least, if you guys can, I would greatly appreciate it if you could follow us on Patreon and support us through Patreon. If you can't, I completely understand, but anything as as low as $1 can go a long way in supporting the channel. So I would greatly appreciate that. So we can maybe move forward with some other really great things for the channel and whatnot. But yeah, that's basically it. You guys take care, God bless, and I'll see you guys around.